To order. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to say it was the first day of spring, but that won't happen for another few hours. And it looks like more like the first day of winter, which we haven't had. But anyways, welcome everybody here this morning. If you could, let's please rise and we'll take a moment of reflection. Your choice before we begin. And Ms. Noble, Ashley, this meeting is being recorded as well as being live streamed. So Ashley is going to give anybody that's online the opportunity to understand that portion.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Eccles. Before I begin, at any point, if you get disconnected, you can dial 1-647-558-0588 and enter the ID for this meeting, which is 891-5626-2480. Both member of council and staff have been briefed on the various features of the Zoom meeting software and will be raising their hand physically to speak. For members of the public, if you require any technical assistance, please send a message to myself, Ashley Noble, Communications Coordinator, and I will attempt to assist you. It should be noted for members of the public that this meeting is taking place across 2 meeting platforms, both on Zoom as well as being live streamed on YouTube. Public participation, if any, must be done through Zoom and cannot be done through YouTube at this time.
Thank you, Ashley. Ask, is there any pecuniary interest or declaration? No nature thereof. Seeing none, if it does arise, certainly can be declared at any time. That brings us down to number 4, delegations. And we have a delegation this morning. Margaret Curler. Margaret, welcome. If you don't mind, we'll ask you to sit beside the police chief. Nothing referred to that, no reference in that you have to sit beside the police chief. Yeah. At this time of the morning, he's usually very harmless. And if you could use the microphone there. There you go. Welcome this morning, Margaret.
Thank you very much. I had submitted a report for this meeting, and after subsequently having the report from that was posted online from David Smith, I've prepared the statement. Okay, thank you. So before I begin, I'd like to mention that I am not a planner, and my reports are not put together as planners would have it. I do attempt to convey necessary information on behalf of my neighborhood and approximately 45 people. So Mr. Mayor, Council, West Grey staff, and the public, we are here because of our concern as to what appears to be a desire to make this proposal fit in our community, when in fact it does not meet requirements. A precedent by definition of the Oxford Dictionary states, an earlier event of action that is regarded as an example or guide to be considered in subsequent similar circumstances. Webster Dictionary defines it as something that may serve as an example or rule to be followed in the future. Today, Tuesday, March 19th, I am here to speak about a precedent and how it is being applied to rezoning and minimum distance separation, known as MDS 1, to property. MDS 1 setback is required for proposed development or dwellings with the intent to prevent land use conflicts and minimize nuisance complaints between farming and non-farming zoning. MDS considers institutional use to be a type B land use, which means that the land use might be more sensitive to odors from livestock operations and is doubled what it would be for type A land use, such as a house. The MDS document states it is for nuisance complaints also regarding flies and dust and vibration. A staff report has been prepared by David Smith, Manager of Planning and Development, for presentation to West Grey Council for a vote regarding rezoning amendment number ZA 33.2023, which he recommends. This report was available 7 days prior to the meeting today and contains some errors and inconsistencies that appear to be a cut and paste from Ron Davidson's report, but with the inclusion of zoning breakdowns. But as an example, I would point out on page 6 of the West Gray staff report in MDS calculations for the barns and properties set out on table 1, all the owners are listed incorrectly with the same concession, lot number, and all with the same roll number. And we did not live on concession 3, it's on concession 2. I would mention also that one additional barn to the north of the Holiday Barn and to the west of the Groton House Barn was not included in this table, and I suspect then did not have MDS calculated. Also, other townships are calculating their MDS based on 1.5 kilometer distance for MDS 1, and on page 7 acknowledges MDS was not calculated on a property just over 1 kilometer. There was no public meeting to address the current rezoning package, and this was a major concern for the residents, and it was hoped there would be more clarity in the report, but there was no rationale for the new wording and changes and no justification. So looking at the Municipality of West Gray zoning bylaw document number 37-2006, adopted by council on May 15th, 2006, and includes amendments in force and in effect as of April 1st, 2017. And that amendment is updated MDS document prepared by the provincial government in 2017 in bylaw 6.17.1 on page 57 states MDS 1 new non-farm uses. This is West Gray zoning bylaw. Notwithstanding any other yard or setback provision of this bylaw, to the contrary, no residential, institutional, commercial, industrial, or recreational use located on a separate lot and permitted within the appropriate zone shall be erected or altered unless it complies with the minimum distance separation MDS 1 as amended, calculated using the formula set out in the appendices to this bylaw. Very complicated. This West Gray bylaw statement not only states so that the MDS has to comply, but is for appropriate zones permitted. And to point out, the uses proposed for this application do not comply with any current West Gray zoning in place. And as a result, there is a request and recommendation to 1, create new zoning to afford exemptions, and 2, not just in one area of the property, but rezoning 3 areas full of exemptions with holdings, and 3, then make a precedent and not have MDS comply as calculated by Ron Davidson to these newly created zones. It does not fit, and the recommendation is for West Gray Council to make it fit and allow it to fit and set a new precedent by doing so. In the previous planning report by Ron Davidson, the current large building on the property is to be repurposed, and now the zoning lines modified to accommodate the chance that if the current building cannot be repurposed, a new building will be constructed. This will take more land out of A2 rural pasture production, and the infrastructure added to the property is now a parking lot, farm workers building, and a new building for the monastery to include the chapel, kitchen, 8 volunteers, accommodation for 12, etc. If that new building is constructed where it is proposed, not only is more land taken out of agricultural production, it moves closer to the Jackson Barn, and MDS will continue to fill from the north, plus then from the south, as it moves closer to the Jackson Barn, since currently it just squeaks through a pass with a clearance of 6.5 feet. Also, if in the future a new barn is planned further back on that 40-acre property parcel, the institutional zoning impinges on that expansion. Whereas the current owner states, as documented in the minutes of the January 16th public meeting on page 6, quote, current property owner advises that he had to go through the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority to build that barn on the property, and noted if he was located further to the south, then he would not have been able to build that building. Has Saugeen been consulted again in this regard? As neighbors had asked in the first meeting if there were changes, would the agencies receive an updated report? The staff report mentions that the County of Gray has no problem in terms of servicing, but this is not exactly right, as Gray County indicated that they would like to see that the MDS requirements are met and the manner in which the zoning areas were adjusted to fit the purposes of the application is odd, when providing proper justification may have been a better option. And also on page 4 of the MDS document, quote, prime agricultural area shall be protected for long-term use for agriculture, and the boundary for institutional has been moved closer to prime A1 land, thus impinging on it, and OMAFR states, quote, shall be given the highest priority of protection. On page 7 of the staff report prepared by David Smith, noted as the required setback is 20 meters deficit. Further stated is, quote, MDS does allow for council to grant minor relief from the MDS formula through a zoning bylaw amendment. However, West Grade's bylaw statement claims that the MDS has to comply. Deviating from that bylaw statement and making an amendment is setting a precedent for the future. The 20 meters referred to as a failing of 65 feet on the proposed property, and there is no mention that it also fails on the house to be used as a residence. The parking lot remains in the same place as the original report, the proposed farm workers building in the same place, and the zoning line was moved to exclude those and change the rezoning for those accessory buildings to not require mention then that the MDS was failing by a minimum of 150 meters, 487.5 feet. Today, when I came to the West Grade office for the meeting, I parked in the parking lot out front, walked into this building, that parking lot being associated and an accessory for this building and zoned as per Grey County GIS on the same lot. The parking lot is for the use of people attending this building. The parking lot on the property for proposed rezoning is for the people to attend an institutional use, for people traveling to attend a service, to be volunteers, to be visitors. The parking lot is part of the institutional use being proposed and should remain in the institutional zone. Site plan control is to be applied to the area rezoned as institutional and must therefore include the parking use. To separate it for convenience